Hi.
Are we live?
I think we're live.
Oh my, we did it.
I know.
Oh my God. Well, what were you going to say something?
No, nothing. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I just want to say hello to everyone for our little impromptu Facebook Live. I am Rosy Aronson, and I'm here with one of my dearest friends and most admired expressive arts shamanic goddess humans, Mireya A. And it is my great honor and pleasure to help people learn more about one of your amazing offerings to the world. So are you ready to get started, Mireya?
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay. All right. So let me just say a little bit about myself. I went to school with Mireya, over 20 years ago at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and we have expressive arts backgrounds together. And more recently, I co-created the Dream Arc, which is a new and exciting program inside of the Gene Keys, where Mireya is one of our cherished creative contributors, where she shares all about some of the altar making work that she does. And we also have collaborated together in the past as well. So it is such an honor for me to be able to introduce you all to Mireya and to ask you to share with us a little bit about the Tending Our Fire circles. So let us know, what are they? How did they come to be?
Well, it's so precious for me to be sitting here with you, Rosie, as well, because actually the impulse for Tending Our Fire circles came after you and I had been co-creating our what were we calling it? Active meditation, creative meditation, release, immerse, emerge, where we would bring groups of people, we would rent huge spaces and create this incredible studio space with all the possible creative invitations. And really that it was a need that came from our own need to create art, because we were missing having a space to make art. And we decided, let's just create it for the world and see what happens, which is, of course, a whole other story. But as a result of that process, I feel like I felt the longing to create a space where people could come and have all kinds of invitations to satisfy their creative hunger and longing. But inside of a space that is full of permission, non-judgmental, with no expectations for aesthetic results, and with lots of different invitations for our inner worlds and the soul to come alive. And I really, especially in the world that we live in, the world I was living in at the time, that was nonstop doing. I also wanted to create spaces where we could just be, where we could enter and slow down, let go of the world outside, and just let ourselves be. So then from that internal place, we can respond to the invitations that were outside. And at the time, I rented a beautiful studio from a friend of mine in Oakland, in the Creative Juices studio, and we did it live. And these circles were mostly they were women's circles, and the idea was that to have 3 hours once a week where all these invitations were there, and where people would come out feeling nourished and fed from having been with themselves and having had a time for themselves. And it went all the way from a woman needing to take a nap in the sofa that night for half an hour and then come back to the group, to having poetry, to having tarots, to having writing time, painting time. And that was the origin of this.
And now you're doing it online from home.
Yes. Now, well, fast forward to the pandemic, they happened in person for quite a while. And then with the pandemic, I was really feeling like, we can't stop. There has to be a way. And at first, I was a little conflicted. How are we going to do expressive arts online? But it has been now 2 years and a half, 3 years really, that I've been offering them online. And it's obviously not the same as when you have everything there in person, but it works. And one of the things that people have found really helpful is that they can actually create almost like their little creative space at home, and then be inspired from there. And I don't know, you got to experience it.
I
Maybe
did.
share a little of how it was to do it online and at home.
I would love to do that, because both I know working with you and experiencing you as a workshop facilitator live in person, you've done so many things. Anybody just go to almaquecanta.com and you'll learn all about Mireya's incredible past and all of the wonderful multifaceted offerings she brings to the world. But yeah, I got to just recently, actually during a pretty big personal crisis time in my life, I got to experience tending the fire circles with Mireya, and it was so unbelievably supportive and nurturing for me. And I didn't know how it was going to be to do this online, but it was kind of amazing because I got to be in my own space, like you were saying, Mireya, and you hold such a safe space. And you also, like, what I really loved was you wove in your astrology background and themes of the times into the theme of the session, each session when we met. And you attract really kind, deep, and compassionate people, and that kind of comes through the airwaves. And then like it was really like maybe, and you could share more about this too, but maybe you would start with the talk and then we would introduce and talk about where we are. We'd have a check-in and there'd be a meditation and then there'd be music and I could dance and I could be in my own space and do that. And then there'd be a time to make art and I could make anything I wanted. I could just doodle if I wanted or break out the paints or do anything. I could journal, I could make poetry. There was such a permission-giving energy, but also structures and invitations that I could respond to if I was inspired. And I just thought it was so beautiful. And it gave me such a deep connection to myself at a time when I really needed it. And I was really amazed at how deep it went and how deeply I went into my own process. So yeah, I can really recommend it. I really can.
Yeah, thank you. It does provide that. I find that just talking about the structure you were talking about, in a way I could say there's like 3 different levels to the offering. One is what you were talking about, which is kind of creating using because there's a concept behind what I created here around the cycles that we live in. I believe that especially as women, we live inside of cycles. Our body carries a cycle. And as human beings, we live inside of the cycles of the seasons, of the moons, of the planetary aspects. And so I wanted these groups to be not only the practices that we have inside of the groups, but I wanted them to really be in correlation with the landscape that we're part of. And whether that is the seasons, whether it's a circle that's happening in the summer, in the spring, in the winter, whether there's particular astrological transits that are affecting and informing us collectively, and then the cycles of the moon. And so that's that initial context that you're talking about that I like to bring in at the beginning, so people can really feel that it's not only what's happening inside, but that there's this larger landscapes that we're part of, that sometimes without even knowing, they can be informing our personal process. And And so then, yes, you already described, after I share about the context and all of that, then we usually get to check in. People get to open their hearts, be vulnerable about what's happening. And then there's a guidance into a process that has different colors, textures, practices, depending of what's happening, where the group is at. Right now, for example, we're having the winter circles where we work a lot with the metaphors of light and dark, with the metaphors of life and death, of our bone structures. So there's many different layers that we're working with. And in addition to that, almost like the texture that wants to be communicated is as you were sharing, an experience of support, of connectedness, of safety with each other, of allowing the fullness of our heart, of our being, of our truthful nature, whatever space we might be in, to come forward. And so that's the idea. And yeah, and they happen for cycles. So they usually, right now I'm doing 6 weeks, which feels like a great number because it's not as fast as the 4 weeks, which I used to do. And once in a while, there's also the longer ones.
And so how often do you start a new cycle? Or like when is your next one starting? And then when might the next one be if someone isn't ready to hop in right away?
Well, there's the last round of the winter cycle that's going to start this Thursday in the evening, which is a really sacred holiday festival with the Imbolc transition that happens as we get prepared. We begin to prepare for the spring, but we're still in the last round of the winter. So we have a circle starting this Thursday, which will go on for 6 weeks. Okay. And then if not, the spring ones will begin in March. And all that information, you can all get it in my website, as Rosy mentioned, which we'll put in the chat, in the comments of Facebook, of the different information around that.
Okay, and each session lasts how long? So people know.
Usually the evening cycle goes from 6:30 to 9 p.m. and the morning one, Pacific time.
Okay.
And then there's also a morning one, which is a nice one for people in Europe or in the East Coast. That happens in the morning from 10 or 9:30 to 12:15, around there.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, I have a question for you, because I know that most of them have been women's circles. What if there's a man who's interested, or someone who's gender fluid or something? Are these specifically for women or not necessarily?
Some of them have been specifically for women. And then others I have at times opened them to all genders. And I haven't had a lot of interest, but they, of course, if you want and are interested in whatever gender you hold or are, you can go ahead and contact me, and I'll let you know when there's one that's opening up.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh my God, let me think if there's anything else.
One thing.
Oh yeah, I wanted to, I know one thing. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I know you kind of already addressed this. I know some people, like when they hear, oh, it's like a creative artist circle and people are going to be making art, and do I have to be an artist? And you already kind of talked about that, but could you speak a little bit more to people who like maybe have never painted or drawn or danced or sung or anything like that? Can it also be for them?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely not for artists. You don't have to do any art. I have people in the circle right now that's happening in the mornings that have never done creative stuff. Sometimes that can be even more freeing and more opening. I remember one of the first teachers I studied with, who was one of the main creators of the intuitive the process painting, Mireya A. way back when, almost 30 years ago, she used to say, you know, that she went and painted with little kids to undo all her art training. And yeah, the idea of these circles is not, and it's not like I'm against high art and beautiful art. And there's some really beautiful products that come out of it. But the idea of this is to free that creative spirit that lives inside all of us, to free the life force, the energy that lives inside of us that is part of our birthright. And that when we do it, we feel more alive, we feel more connected, we feel joy. And not only that, but that by inviting the different practices, it tends to happen that we might begin in a particular emotional state. And by the end of it, we feel like something moved. You know, it might not necessarily take us always to amazing and happiness and opening, but generally it helps us move energy. And that's the idea of these groups, that we're holding art and the creative process as a human expression that is our birthright. And that a lot of times we haven't been given the spaces to be able to express it. I mean, let's face it, a lot of us don't have these spaces. And it's not uncommon that by the first moment of the sequence I do of movement, people feel like, oh, I so needed that, just to be connected to our bodies through movement, through being in the body, through, as you said, I often start with a meditation, and then the working with, sometimes we work with clay, with paint, with our hands, there's just something by engaging all of our sensory faculties that opens up so many textures and layers of who we are, that, yeah, by all means, I mean, this is an invitation for anyone who's wishing time for themselves, time to connect with their inner world. You're going through a hard time and you want a holding, a container, as you were sharing. And also those times where even, I mean, I myself have, it's hard sometimes to sustain our own personal practice. And when we have a group that's holding it with us, it really can be inspiring and inviting. And if you have all the creations in your own home, then it can even spark more of that sometimes. So that's the idea here, that it will really support your own life and bring more joy, bring more creativity, more juice into your life. By doing it with others. And the same thing for those people who ask, you know, gosh, I'm on Zoom all day, I don't want one more Zoom thing. And even though we are on Zoom, we're not on the camera the whole time. There's a big chunk of the process that is movement, that's creative, that's so in that sense, it is different than your usual just sitting in front of the computer.
Yeah, I'm glad that you say that, because that's really true. And this thing too about, I don't know how to put it, but it's so permission giving. So on the one hand, it's about allowing ourselves to express, but it's also about trusting in our timing, trusting in our intuition, feeling what the body needs. Like, I feel like you were so good at guiding us to really trust what our body needs. So for example, someone wants to take a nap, or I'm doing movement, you have this beautiful music going and I'm on my floor in a little curled up ball until slowly I feel like I want to open and start moving. Like, there's that kind of permission. So whatever state you're in, it will shift your state, but it will also embrace your state. Like that, I just want to say that it's really such a gift to give yourself. Such a gift.
Thank you. That is so true. That permission is so important, right? When we're creating, and the beauty too of it is that we're doing both. My hope with these groups is that people can feel both that individual response to what we each need, as you were just describing, right, with being curled up, and then also the collective influence of being in a circle where others are also sharing their own worlds, and where there can be symbols, metaphors, all kinds of different common threads that begin to arise in the group, and that then really create like a collective pool of richness that inspires our soul to open more and to feel more free and expressive. And so it's both and.
It just occurred to me to say that if anyone is listening to this who is into the dream arc or into the gene keys, this could be an amazing integration, like an intimate integration process to bring those contemplations in and embody them and work with them and play with them. So I just want to encourage people to think about that. Like if you're doing a sequence or a retreat with the gene keys, or if you're deep in the dream arc, consider doing Attending Our Fire as a way to really like bring that exploration to life, because it is a total container for any inner exploration you want to do. So I just want to put that out there, a little shout out for people.
Wow, that's so true. It really does serve as an integration. I myself right now, I'm doing the Venus sequence of the gene keys, and I do find that in my personal creative practice, there are places of the works with the shadows, for example, that are finding expressions through the integration of this work. And the same thing, the work with the altars that I presented there in the dream arc, I do find that then sometimes in these groups, there's that invitation of bring your altar and really work with it. And so yeah, there can be a really beautiful crossover with work that is taking you deep, and then using this material and this process as a way of integration.
Absolutely. So, Mireya, are there any other details you want to make sure people have?
In the comments, I'll put my website and the link to the information, and I'm always open to have a conversation with anyone if there's questions, to make sure that this feels right for you, or about the work, or whatever is needed.
Wonderful. And you could not be in safer, deeper, more loving and compassionate and creative hands than Mireya's. Really. Oh, yeah. Nobody holds space like Mireya Alejo.
Thank you, Rosy. Yeah. I love co-creating with you always. And thank you so much for this. So fun to chat about this with you.
Thank you for being willing.
All right.
Okay, so we say goodbye now. Is that how it works?
Yes. Well, okay. I stopped the live.